Hi, Joanne, and welcome to Mindvalley Book Club. And it's a huge pleasure for me to talk with you because when I saw your book in the new releases of that week when it came out, I was very excited. There's not enough conversation on the topics that you cover in your book. And as we talked before we started the interview, there wasn't a book like this before. So, and why I say that is, yes, there are books which are well, on feminism directly, or have a very strong feminist streak in them, or not streak, let's say theme in them. But this book combines actually psychology and feminism, two of my absolute favorite topics. And this book is, in essence, about psychology, actually, and feminism, of course, but the way it influences us as human beings, and particularly us women, I believe. Although, I have to say straight away, the book is not just for the parents of the daughters, but also for the parents of the boys. And as a mother of both a boy and a girl, I could relate on both fronts with what was written in the book. So before we go into the book, I have to make a proper introduction. So Joanne, God, this is some kind of mysterious problem in my language today. My guest today, Joanne Finkelstein, is a clinical psychologist with education from Harvard University and Northwestern University, and specializing in, well, not just psychology, but actually in biases, in social justice, and in sexism in particularly. Joanne, in addition to having a regular practice in Chicago, where she is, she's also a contributor to very big media outlets such as Psychology Today, New York Times. I know you have written for them, Oprah, CNN, and well, the big media outlets. And in addition to that, Joanne is also an activist and an advocate, and is on the boards of several social organizations which help protect women's safety and security. I know I said it in my own words, not the official bio, but Joanne, is there something I'm left out which is important to mention?
No, I think you covered it. Yeah, I'm in private practice and I see a lot of girls and their families, and that's why, I wanted to write a book about raising empowered, resilient girls today in the modern world.
And for those of you who haven't gotten the book yet, I warmly recommend, because it's one of the books which, well, in this year, which is about to end, is probably going to be one of the most memorable for me. I really enjoyed it the moment I got the book. I started reading it before even Joanne said yes to the interview. So I warmly recommend it. But now we'll go into the book. So, Sexism and Sensibility. Can I ask, I know it's not on the topic, but why such a title for the book?
Um, well, my editor and I wanted to have a bit of a literary reference because it is, sort of an upmarket nonfiction book, but we just wanted to be out there with sexism and not pretend it's about something else. And it really is about the barrage of sexism that girls go through and how it affects them and their sensibilities. So
It's, believe it or not, but when I read the title, I thought, of course, of Jane Austen, and I wonder if there's any well, connection to that.
just the title, really.
Just the
Yeah,
title.
just the
Well,
title. And I mean, it's Jane
I believe
Austen.
for her time,
I'm
she
with it.
was a feminist as well. For her time, of course,
Exactly. Yeah.
the feminism changes. Now, I guess what I want to start with is your journey to feminism started from a very early age. You describe in the book the story where at an early age you noticed how your mother has your father's family name, and it hurt you. Can you maybe go into detail and share what was your relationship with feminism? Why I'm asking it is because I am a newly discovered feminist. I think I've always had these feelings, but it took years to find courage to actually call myself that, and to
Mhm.
actually be open talking about that.
Well, believe it or not, I was having all of these, excuse me, all of these, sort of revelations that I was being treated differently. And I'll tell you in a story in a second that's different than the one that how the book opens. Sorry. But I wasn't understanding it. And I really didn't come to feminism myself until after college, right? So I grew up in Canada. I live in Chicago now, like you said, but I grew up in Canada where hockey is a national obsession. I have three brothers, no sisters, and my brothers love to play hockey. I wanted to play too, right? So I asked my parents for a hockey stick. To my delight, they bought me one for my birthday, but to my horror, it was bright pink and looked like a toy version of my brother's. Right. So I kind of felt cheated and confused. Like, why did they have the ones that looked like the professionals and I didn't? So, fast forward, I've worked with girls and women for the last 24 plus years in my private practice. And what I discovered was that every girl has a pink hockey stick story, right? Meaning girls constantly get messages that make them feel unseen, unheard, or not taken seriously. And I witness how harmful these messages are to my patient's sense of self and sense of potential, right? These are like spoken and unspoken messages that are tiny psychological paper cuts that become just festering wounds of self doubt. But, and this sort of gets to your question, in my family, when I would push back or get upset about the gender differences that I noticed, my parents insisted that they didn't treat me differently from the boys, or they'd say, you're being too sensitive, or stop being so dramatic, right? Classic comments that we now know girls and women hear a lot. Anyway, so to avoid criticism, I just sort of learned to hide my feelings. And I felt a little, I was so bewildered. I felt a little crazy. Like, I think this is happening, but people are saying it's not happening. Anyway, it wasn't until years later when I was doing a master's degree that I began to really understand my experience, right? I mentioned in a paper for my developmental psychology class that I'd been accused of overreacting when I felt demeaned. And the professor scribbled in the margins, that's what people say to talk girls out of their feelings. It was such a validating moment for me,
Mm.
right? So I think that is when I really started to own that the culture is messed up when it comes to girls and women.
Mm.
And then it was sort of validated, like in my professional experiences, I was seeing this all over the place. So basically, validating girls' experiences and opening parents' eyes are why I wrote the book.
Mhm. What I liked about your book is that it has a very sober view of feminist movement as well. So it is, of course, at times maybe a little shocking, but I mean, as a person who has a active practice and works with people, you have the right to to shock your reader with certain views. But what I want to ask is, currently there is a view that feminism is the question of the past, because now you could, at least maybe in US, you can't be elected a president, but at least you can run for president as you if you're a woman. Well, I speak from a country where at the moment there was a moment when we had a president and a prime minister women, so I'm proud of that. But a lot of people say that this is not an issue anymore. Even the pay gap is being not so big. It is still there. So yet, when you read the book, it comes across that we are very far from the just world. So, what is your experience? How far have we gone in that battle for equality?
Um, when people say sexism doesn't exist, the numbers don't lie, right? Women continue to be systematically underrepresented in decision-making processes that shape their societies and their lives. Just, I mean, all the big stuff, modern democracy, medicine, the justice system, the nuclear family, right, were created by and for men, despite women depending on them too, right? And women are also underrepresented in healthcare research, car crash safety tests, and other like important or really life-saving entities, right? They earn less than men, they face more negative attitudes, and they're bodily autonomy is under constant threat, including just being less safe in their own home. And, pretty much women feel badly about most women feel badly about their bodies. But yes, of course there's been progress, right? I mean, men don't legally own us anymore. And as of 1993 in the US, a husband can't legally rape his wife. Um, Women, we can work, wear pants, play sports, have our own credit cards and bank accounts and businesses. Like, we have come a long way and we're better off, um, than women in many other countries. The problem is we're supposed to be grateful for what we do have rather than these nagging ingrates who expect, full equality. you know. So the progress we've made is used to shut down the work still to be done.
Hmm. I think it was also in your book that there was a line that actually the progress in equality, gender equality, uh, yes,
Yes.
is slowing down in the last decades. It's not, it was at its peak at the end of the 20th century, I understand.
Yeah, right. It was at its peak in the 90s and now it has slowed down and stalled in some areas.
So, as I was reading the book, and of course, I have been interested in the topic recently, so the thoughts have been in my head for a while. I'm 46 still, a few days, but I can't help feeling that a lot of decisions in my life I had taken also based on the ideas of what a good wife is supposed to do and what a good wife is supposed to, well, how she's supposed to be in the family. Uh, and I can't help feeling that I have made a lot of mistakes in my life, which, or not mistakes, or the choices and decisions I wouldn't have done now that I know better. So I know you you work with a lot of young people, but would you have anything to advise to people like me who are actually in the middle of our life, feeling that, God, I wish I had known before that this choice was forced upon me by society and not maybe what I actually wanted?
Yeah. I mean, I work with a lot of women too. I mean, I work with a lot of adults too, and um, many of them are struggling with the same things as their teenage daughters are, right? Because we have been conditioned to not expect a lot, right? Like, there's a whole chapter in the book about healthy entitlement. And I would say that some of the best feedback I'm getting about the book is that it's been really healing and liberating to to the readers beyond how they plan to use it for their daughters. So, my advice is just to sort of do what it sounds like you're doing, is really thinking about all the ways that you've been conditioned, right? If you are a woman of any race or ethnicity in this world, you have been brought up to believe that self-sacrificing is part of being a woman, right? And we call being entitled a bad thing, right? Used when we think that somebody expects too much. But over and over again, I see girls and women in my practice who aren't entitled enough, right? Who lack what I call a healthy sense of entitlement, right? And so, to put it into concrete terms, by third grade, girls start to ask for less than boys, right? Like,
Mm.
one study found that when children were given the opportunity to negotiate for their favorite stickers, the older girls asked for two fewer than the boys. But here's the thing, only when negotiating with a man. This reflects, Christina, which is sort of getting what you're getting at, this reflects the same gender gap in negotiation we see in adults,
Mhm.
right? And when women don't negotiate for as much as they could, which research shows they often don't with a man, they stand to lose $500,000 in their lifetime, right? So what lessons are we imparting to girls, and what lessons have we as women internalized, right? Either subliminally or directly, that lead girls to believe that they deserve less, especially with regard to speaking up,
Mhm.
respect, and money, right? Well, for one, when they speak up, they're often interrupted, right? We don't like girls' strong opinions. We don't like their anger because it doesn't fit with the femininity that we've been fed. For two, we teach them being liked is more important than being respected. And we spend a lot of time trying to be liked. And we don't talk to them about money, right? Or give them nearly as much as we do with boys.
Mhm.
So it's their job to make everybody happy, to be liked, to swallow their anger, right? And that's leaves them with this sort of very narrow range of acceptable girl voices that straitjackets them and undermines how they're regarded, right? And so I would say that I outline these five voices in the book that we want to help our girls cultivate. We also, as women, need to cultivate that, right? If we didn't have parents that really helped us with that.
Uh, Another question which is related to that, and I'll get to the book as well, is if you have already established your relationships with the people in your family, the closest people, and you have assumed that role of a carer and nurturer and homemaker, to the detriment probably of your other pursuits, it's how do you break that cycle? How do you stop it? Because everybody's comfortable in their position, in their role, and if you say that, hey, I think this is unfair, that it's all on me, I don't think it's going to go down easy. And are we to break those chains, or should we just shut up, hoping that our daughters will do better than us?
No, I absolutely don't think we should shut up, but I do think that I would be world famous if I had the answer for that, right? Because it's so systemically supported, right? That women behave in a certain way and men aren't, in many ways, women have made progress, but men haven't caught up on that, if we are going to be more active in the world, they need to be more active in the home. So unfortunately, I think it leads to, I think that's the number one cause of divorce is that women just feel overwhelmed and unsupported. Um, so I think that we need changes in government, we need changes in just systemically, but in the home, there's couples therapy, there's fair play, that game fair play that has helped some people. And I think it's a lot of sending, I wrote an article on the mental load, and it
Mhm.
was like my one article that went really viral because everybody was giving it to their male partners, like people in heterosexual relationships, and their partners were sort of finally getting it. Um,
Mhm.
but for it to stick, it's really hard. And this is one of the reasons why I wrote the book, because I want to break this generational cycle where women feel so overwhelmed and undersupported. So I think knowing your worth, knowing that your time, like you shouldn't have to reload the dishwasher because he just sort of threw the dishes in there in a sloppy way and nothing fits, like your time is worth as much as his time.
Hmm. I'm actually divorced, so a single mother now. But coming back to the days when I wasn't. But what happens if there comes the predictable argument, but my time is actually worth more than yours. Do you want me to drop the work, which pays me so and so? And a lot of women, that work isn't paid. There is no value to housework, at least not in countries' GDPs, as far as I know. So, what are women to do if they are already in the situation where, uh, yeah, where they are cornered in a way? Sorry,
Yeah,
I
all I
think
can
we're not
say
on topic, but I
all,
just, yeah.
all I can say is it's really, really frustrating. And the thing that helped in my own marriage, because it was a real problem early on, once we had kids and mental and emotional and physical labor got so much more, is my husband started doing the work. And if your husband or your male partner is not willing to do the work, it's problematic, right? You can't convince them that you're worth it if they don't want to see it. And so he he's been in men's groups for, like 10 years. And it really has made a difference because he was willing to do the work. But I'm sorry to say that if a man is not willing to do the work and really want to see their partner as equal, then it's going to be really, really hard. But sometimes men are more open when they have daughters, and you say, like, don't you want them to have a partnership where they can expect equality? Right. And then you can start modeling, which is the most important thing, is modeling equality, which again doesn't mean like you can still have a woman who not a woman who works from who's a stay-at-home mom, and a woman and a man who works. Like you can have the traditional layout, and as long as there's enough rest for both of them, right? They get equal rest, I like to call it, because we don't always have our roles perfectly equally divided. There are ways to model equality. And
Mhm.
it's so, so important for our daughters so that they grow up and expect more and get more than we got.
I would love to go deep into this conversation, but it's not strictly speaking for those who are listening. It's not strictly speaking about the book. It's just it's loosely related. What the book talks about is actually about how our behaviors influence our children as they grow up. And here I want to ask, when is the right time to start talking about gender inequality? And is it the conversation we have with the girls, or how do we talk about that with the boys?
Really great questions. So, I think that you can start talking to your kids about gender bias really, really early on, right? Like when they start saying that pink is for girls, right? You can sort of question that and be like, huh, well, pink doesn't have a gender, right? Pink is just a color, right? And it was one of my proudest moments when my son came home. I don't even know where he got it, and he was like, "It's silly that pink is for girls. It doesn't. It's not. It's just a color." And so I was like, "Oh, okay. He's catching on that there are these biases out there that, and pink was his favorite color. I mean, as a teenager, pink is not his favorite color because he is sufficiently conditioned by but he has the critical thinking skills. And so I would say that it's never too early. I understand that it's very tricky, especially like I felt more comfortable talking about it with my son than I did with my daughter because I worried about robbing her of the sense that the world is fair and making her feel inferior before she did. But as I listened to her questions, like, why why does the girl never win on MasterChef Junior? Or, again, living in the States, she said, why would a man who says such insulting things to women be able to be elected president? This was in 2016. And like, basically, she was asking me, explain it to me, right? And so I think there are age appropriate ways where you can start to use the endless teachable moments around you, right? You can um, um, look, you can watch if you're watching TV with them, you can say, huh, do you notice how girls, because this is actually true, do you notice that girls on TV often, they show girls using magic to solve problems, but the boys use science and their physicality? Like, I wonder why that is. It makes it seem like girls in real life can't, can't solve problems because they don't have real magic, because they don't have magic. But we know that girls are clever, fast on their feet, good at science, whatever it is, right? Whatever point you're wanting to make. Or did you notice how um, the doctor kept interrupting me, but he didn't interrupt Daddy? And it could be, we don't know for sure, but it could be sexism because we know that girls and women get interrupted more than boys and men. But the good news is women everywhere are fighting that
Mhm.
because it doesn't mean you don't deserve to be heard. It just means that's something going on in the culture that we want to change.
So talking about the girls, I actually cut your book into so many quotes. I do not know how we're going to be picking. There's just a few quotes, but there was one quote I wanted to read now, and wanted you to comment because it's in the very beginning. A sunshiny girls can do anything mindset is far from enough to protect them. So I really love that part. So there is this girl power movement which says you can do anything. So what's the problem with that? Because you do write about that in the book, that this is not enough.
Yeah, I'll tell you that one of the other titles I had was called Beyond Girl Power
Mm.
because girl power is not enough, right? It's very confusing when people are saying, people are saying like girls, are badasses and women are badasses and girls are strong and powerful and we bring them to women's marches and we give them RBG paraphernalia and I'm using all these US references, but we do all of these things that we're telling them you're great, but then when they get undermined or they're interrupted all the time and um, there was a study done that shows that a big study by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that showed adolescence is when girls and boys start to diverge and girls start to realize that they're not taken seriously, right? Because it's made up of just a bazillion moments of being not taken seriously, not considered credible, talked over, um, not given as much time in classrooms, stuff like that. So it's very confusing when people say, girls are great, but they're not given the language around what is actually happening. So I think we just have to balance the darkness with hope. Like, this is happening. These are some unsavory things that we don't like that are going on, but women everywhere are fighting it. And we can just, and we don't always have to talk about it, right? A lot of times it's just sort of making sure their voices are heard, right? So if they, my daughter used to start a sentence and then her brother would interrupt her or she would get self-conscious and I'd be like, you know, the beginning of just say what you're thinking. I love to know what's going on in your mind. Like you have such a great mind, right? And I could see slowly over time that she became more outspoken. Um,
My own journey probably to feminism started also with a weird hump of of girl power. And I remember before I became conscious about the problems of the inequality and sexism and the system, I probably was feeding into the system, feeling that, look, I'm cool. I can compete with these guys. I have the strength to play the bro game. And if you're not there, then it's your problem, right? So I know that by the end of the book, you do give hope that we can change the situation, the system, if we cooperate, if we help each other. But currently, I still feel that there's a divide in the woman world where there are women who would declare that they hate feminism and they think that this is something is wrong. So, how do we talk on these topics without alienating people who actually should be together with us fighting for our common good?
yeah. I mean, I think it's so frustrating. That is one of the most disheartening things for me is when there are other women that they stand more with men, right? And I think again that's part of the conditioning, right? Like we grow up in a culture that sort of divides um feminine and masculine so concretely in these ways. And anything that's feminine is kind of inferior to that which is masculine. It automatically makes you inferior, right? I mean, just think about like, um, you know, baseball is more serious and important than fashion, or financial knowledge is more important than relational knowledge. So kind of, when feminism has been so associated with women who can't take a joke and women who complain. And so nobody, it's kind of like nobody wants to be that girl, right? But any kind of girl is that girl. Like, so, unless you are kind of aligning with men, so it's really hard to bring other women into the fold if they're not willing to be there. But you know, I think that if you're, willing to have these conversations and be open and listen, which can be really hard to do when you're seeing it so clearly and they're not, you can have them look around and notice that they're interrupted more, notice how they're treated differently, um, and notice how they might be blaming themselves, right? And I mean, it's really tough, but I think just being open and hearing what other people say and being as calm as possible when you're talking to other women is important.
Mhm. I just feel that we are still at the point where even talking about these topics is a little bit hard because the F word is not a very, and I mean feminism, is not a very welcome word in a lot of discussions, particularly here in Estonia. I happened to create one feminist event in summer here, and it was an interesting experience, to be honest, because even the woman on stage would sometimes say things along the lines like, "Oh, but that's not a problem for me. I just figured it out," and you feel that a woman next to you is standing with a man and not with not with a woman. So that's why I'm incredibly passionate about this topic because I feel we don't talk enough about it. Now, in the book, you do mention that when kids are born, they're not as different, at least their thought patterns and their abilities are not as different as we sometimes assume. Yet, part of the feminist discussion is that women's bodies are different and they're not being recognized, at least, for example, if we take medical research. So where does that line run between, okay, here we're actually all human, and here we're actually different enough that we should pay attention?
Well, I mean, so it's very normal to stereotype, right? It's just our brain's way of simplifying the complexities that we encounter every day so that we can make sense of the world, recall things more quickly. But the small differences we see at birth, or because we're so our brain is so trained to stereotype and create categories, the small differences that we see at birth get magnified by parents and teachers and others and how they talk to and play with their children, right? Which is why we need to be conscious, right? We need to be aware of the stereotypes we're perpetuating. um, in the Western world, we just overassign gendered meanings to anatomical sex, right?
Mhm.
And we've relied on a long history of stereotype to determine what's right and what's wrong for each sex, which, just pure and simple, that gets in the way of identity formation, right? Even just what we wear is policed, right? Like dresses, heels, wigs, makeup, the color pink, those were all once worn by boys and men. So it kind of is absurd how adamantly we argue um, now that these things are for girls only, right? So I think really being aware, right, which is very hard unless you are willing to read up on it and understand, like it starts in utero, right? We start constructing boxes for our babies even before birth, right? So mothers who know that they're having a boy are more likely to describe their baby's movements as strong and vigorous. But mothers who don't know the sex describe no such differences, right? And once kids are born, once babies are born, infant daughters are described as little and beautiful and rated as, less strong and more delicate than infant sons, even when there's no objective difference in birth length, weight, and APGAR scores. So you have to remember when we're interacting with our kids that we interpret behavior through a gendered lens, right? Like crying means a girl is sad, but a boy is angry. We use emotion-focused words with girls and achievement-related language like proud, win, and best with boys. So not only does categorizing kids by gender potentially rob them of expressing, what's nuanced and interesting about them, but it can muddy their grasp on who they are,
Mm.
right? And we know that the development of cross-gender abilities and less stereotypical gender roles is associated with, intelligence and academic excellence, higher self-esteem, etc.
I
Right?
really
So,
like this part where you mentioned that kids who have other gender friends, not romantic relationships, but friends, it's good on their development. That was well, unexpected, I guess, for me.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's really good for their development because we stop seeing them as other. So, in answer to your question, like, yes, there are small differences that we see at birth. Um, but the brain is plastic, right?
Mm.
And so the neuroscientist Lise Elliott says that the brain is plastic. And if we constantly, play to the sort of ball throwing, doll playing strengths of the kids, then we are magnifying those.
Mhm.
And yet, if we introduce them to all toys and help them develop, like if girls have tiny little um, um, if like if they're a little bit weaker in spatial skills, research shows that that if we do spatial activities with them, those differences disappear. Kids who had more access to spatial activities when they were younger are more likely to play basketball and do things that require spatial stuff when they're older. So there are all of these ways that the differences just disappear if we are conscious of them.
I guess as a society, we don't even know what's possible because we have never given a chance to one generation to just evolve as humans and not as little boys and girls and see. Because I have, and I'm sorry, it will sound probably horrible, but I have a man's sense of direction. I actually can out outman any man when it comes to finding, my way in unfamiliar environments. And I know it sounds horrible. I just try to make the point about how we probably as a society are not aware of what our little girls and what our little boys are capable of if they were not boxed into their genders. A question I want to ask, there's one chapter, for those of you who haven't read the book yet, there's one chapter which was for me also an experience to read because I haven't come across that a lot. So for me, it's a new area. But the gender fluidity, how much do you think the gender fluidity is going to influence the conversation about sexism? And I'm not talking about feminism per se, because feminism is more like we associate it with women, but sexism exists not just for women, obviously.
Can you repeat the question? What?
Question is how much our consciousness or understanding, widening understanding of gender fluidity going to influence the conversation about sexism in general?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a good question, right? I think part of the biggest problem is this binary, right? Like nobody fits into one category wholly, right? Gender is really a spectrum, and like you just demonstrated, like you have a really good sense of direction, right? So again, binary structure, like the categorizing, it's easy. It's shorthand for what clothing or toys to buy and what to expect. And for, girls, that means, stereotypically, it means being demure, nurturing, agreeable, sexually naive. And for boys, it's being active, aggressive, in charge, and sexually experienced. But kids of all genders, including those who are cisgender, tell us that understanding gender as a spectrum is liberating and truer to their experience, right? A majority of the Gen Z set believes that there are more than two genders, right? 1 out of 18 young adults identify as something other than male and female. So embracing gender as a continuum reduces stereotypes, and that's a good thing for everyone, particularly our girls.
Mhm.
Right? This sort of harmful trend toward gender essentialism in parenting um, is in some ways arguably more common than ever, right? Because it's driven by like its profitability and the cultural embrace of girls' sexualization, right? I mean, toy manufacturers have been peddling objectification and the erasure of girls for financial gain for decades. Um, so yeah, I think the reason I take the people, like kids today breaking out of the gender binary, because, culturally we've given them a little more room. And, maybe we as a society didn't expect it to go this far, but I think they're doing it because they have felt so boxed in. And they're just sort of saying, the box you're putting me in doesn't fit, and so I'm going to create these other boxes. Hopefully one day we will just be able to be who we are and not have to label everything.
Yeah, I liked you were describing the interaction between one mother and daughter, how they came to a conclusion that actually we're just trying to find labels, but we don't know the labels. This conversation is so new to us. And while I also feel a little bit confused and lost when we talk about gender fluidity, but I also understand that if you try to demolish something, of course it's going to make a bigger splash and bigger bang than if we were inherently in the society that was a little bit less well reliant on stereotypes. I'm very sad that we have to be finishing this interview. For people who are thinking about the book, I really strongly recommend. The thing is, we only covered very few parts. The book goes very deep into a lot of very important topics, including the beast, the beauty industry that actually traumatizes our girls. About it talks about sex, about, as I said, gender fluidity, and literally all the aspects of life which are important to our little girls and not so little girls, and gives practical advice also how to navigate this world, because it is confusing. I do want to ask the one before the last questions, which is so if you're a well-read, curious person who understands, who can see that, it is really tempting to go about the world and keep pointing the finger. Okay, this is wrong, and try to convert the people in your world. But how do you survive? Because we still live in a world and in a system which sees us, the people who see the sexism, as weirdos, as the whiny, dramatic people who can't just chill and take the world as it is. So, is there any advice how to survive this world without actually ruining your relationship with everyone in your life and making a meaningful difference?
I mean, I think, reading is so important. And it was one of the reasons, one of my hopes for the book is that it would, moms might pick it up, or parents. There's a lot of, amazingly, a lot of men have been reading it, but parents would pick up this book, or educators would pick up this book for kids because they want the best for kids. But it would create this deep understanding in them and a deep confidence that, they can, even if they're called a whiner, even if they're called, that they lack a sense of humor, that it won't affect them as much. But, always surround yourself with communities that get it. Um, join, the some, national organizations for women, become active in certain areas that you believe in, whether it's local politics or whatever it is. I think when you're surrounded by people and you're slowly creating communities, it makes it so much easier to stick to what you believe in.
And by the way, the holiday season is coming, so I think it makes a great book, at least to to people who are the direct audience, which is the parents of younger children who are growing up into hopefully a new world. I do want to ask the traditional question of my audience to leave a heart for my guests in the chat or in the comments below if you're watching it in replay recording, because your love matters, even if it's in a replay, it still matters a lot. So do leave your heart. And my last question was, you actually partially answered it. How would you like to change that your book would change the world? Um,
Mm.
yeah.
Well, it's called Sexism and Sensibility, Raising Empowered, Resilient Girls in the Modern World. Um, and I would say that it is more than a parenting guide, right? It's a blueprint for change. And as a parent and a psychologist, I've seen how early and deeply sexism can erode girls' confidence and safety. And the book equips parents and advocates with tools to push back against these forces and raise girls who will always stand tall, even in the face of the stuff that you're talking about of people not taking them seriously, right? But it's not just for parents, right? Like I keep hearing how women are using it to reclaim their power and men are using it to learn how to be allies. So I think if we really take these lessons to heart, we can build a world where every girl feels safe, feels valued, and capable of reaching her full potential. So that is my hope.
And from my part, I would say, even our interview started with my problems or the problems which I perceived about my own experience. So for me, I think it was, and I'm 46. For me, it was reparenting my little girl a little bit and looking back into my life and well, my decisions in my life. I warmly recommend you guys read the book because uh, it comes with a warning, though, because you will start noticing things which probably before you didn't realize were unjust and unfair, and it's going to be shattering a little bit. I notice how habitually we feed into that system, and that book will help you to start noticing these things, not just for your children, but for you as well. Also, it gives you some measured language to talk and to describe the problem, because a lot of the times we feel the emotion, but we can't put it into the words. And I think that's also a huge thing, because if anything, our society needs to keep talking about sexism, because I want my children to grow up in a better world. And sorry, I'm so passionate about this topic. Thank you so much, Joanne,
Amen.
writing this book and for giving it to us. And yes, you saw the book. If you see it in the bookshop, grab it from the bookshop. If not, we'll leave a link to Amazon. Great gift, especially for the mothers of the daughters, but I think men should also read it. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next year. Bye bye.
My pleasure. Take care.